Hi, this is a new show, I guess. UI designers rejoice, for Roblox has released 25 new fonts. Frankly, I barely know how to pronounce half of these, so I'll just list them on the screen as I talk. The font selection was first discovered back in September with the API changelog, as each font's name was given its own enum item. The fonts were enabled Tuesday evening before Roblox's official announcement 11:30 Wednesday night. Man, these night owls. According to the announcement, the reason they added a measly 25 fonts is because they were concerned about the size of the application, so they want to come up with another solution for font availability. Also, every font on Roblox combined is barely 10 megabytes. Roblox ain't kidding around when it comes to file size, apparently. But enough about that, let's talk about the fonts themselves. They can all be found online and free for commercial use, which explains why they were willing to introduce so many, mostly under the open font license. So even if you're not big on UI design, maybe you'll discover one worth downloading for other uses, like video production. Hey? Personally, I'm most interested in Fredoka 1 and Permanent Marker. Maybe I'll finally graduate from using Gotham Black for everything. That used to be like the only good font. Remember how BubbleChat was a thing and then kinda got neglected for an eternity to the point where people didn't know how to enable it? Well, it's finally been resurrected with Lua internals and a fancy new look. According to the initial reveal in August, the makeover sports improved performance as well. However, there may be previously unknown penalties due to the use of the cool but relatively expensive UI corner object, so there's no conclusive testing to determine whether or not the new system is actually more performant. By far the biggest advantage for developers is the swath of customization options included, including visibility, duration, stack limit, text and background styling, and more. If these options really aren't enough, or there's something you just really need to change, you can do that thing every engineer will tell you not to do. The modules are stored at this location and the loader at this one, and you'll need to strip out any uses of Roblox script security members and substitute your own libraries for core packages. At some point in your life, you've probably dealt with the pain of accidentally enabling the constraint setting for the studio draggers and spending countless minutes on end trying to figure out why you couldn't move anchored parts. Thankfully, the team behind the studio modeling tools has rolled out a solution for this into beta, changing the constraints button into its own separate mode. Switching from geometric to physical will allow you to use the modeling tools while utilizing the behavior of the physics engine. Importantly, the dragger icons will turn green with constraint symbols, making the current mode clear to clueless users like me. As someone who doesn't really work with the physics engine that much, I never used the old constraint draggers and I probably won't use the new physical draggers either, but man, I could just watch this clip for the rest of my life. Speaking of physics, if you had an old game that relied upon body movers, specifically body angular velocity objects, you narrowly avoided a potentially game-breaking update as Roblox held back their plans to introduce a new body angular velocity property for base parts. If this change had gone through, any script attempting to index a body angular velocity object by its default name would have received the property value instead of the object, almost certainly leading to an error. This is due to the fact that Roblox prioritizes returning properties over instances. The plans for the new body angular velocity property were revealed on the 9th, along with a heads up to fix your game. Unfortunately, the kind of poorly coded game to index body movers by their default name is exactly the kind of game that wouldn't have a developer around anymore to fix it. Staff member Context Lost gave some context around the need for the property, since raw velocity is already a thing. Essentially, body angular velocity accounts for the velocity according to the root of the assembly, whereas the previous properties always assumed the parent part was the assembly root. This would result in weird behavior where setting a part's velocity equal to itself would change the velocity and other fun shenanigans, so the new property definitely serves a purpose. After receiving feedback from the community, the team has decided to delay this change while they work on a better solution, probably just giving the property a different name. I don't mean to get political, but assembly angular velocity has my vote. However, I'm sure we can all agree that listening to community feedback and holding back the change in favor of backwards compatibility was a pretty epic move. Roblox is going public, baby! Or that appears to be the plan, according to their incredibly verbose announcement on Monday. Roblox announces confidential submission of draft registration statement for a proposed public offering. To decipher the word salad, Roblox is planning to become tradable on the stock market. They took the first step by telling the SEC, hey, let us trade with the plebs, please! And from here, the two will go over details before deciding on how much stock to sell for what price. If this blog post seems like a nothing burger, that's because it's literally just a legally required announcement that they're trying to go public. Well, it would be an announcement if CNBC hadn't already leaked the bloody plans over a week earlier. According to their sources, Roblox was allegedly considering a direct listing as opposed to an IPO, where no new stock is actually sold and ownership isn't diluted, but it's pretty clear they're now leaning towards a traditional IPO. The choice seems kind of obvious, since it doesn't make much sense to go public if you're not planning to actually gain any capital from it. I know what stock dilution is because I watched The Social Network.
You planted that story about the chicken.
Personally, I'm torn on the plans to go public. On one hand, I can't deny my concern of Roblox being forced to cater to the whims of disconnected investors. You're supposed to be catering to us developers, Dave. But on the other hand, I think it'll be super neat if all of us can own a little piece of Roblox, no matter what David Gibson says. The upcoming removal of the HasBadge web endpoint was announced to a resounding, what? Basically, the API endpoint was used to allow third-party programs to check if a user owned a specific badge. Thing is, the endpoint only worked on badges created before June of 2018, ever since the ID system it used was replaced and deprecated. Thankfully, the deprecated Lua API methods will continue working for the time being, so your games are safe. If you're curious about the new way to check if a player owns a badge via a web API, this endpoint will accept a user ID and a list of badge IDs and return a list of dictionaries where each dictionary contains the badge ID and the date it was awarded. If the player doesn't have the badge, there won't be an entry in the list for that badge ID. So if you've got a website that uses the HasBadge endpoint, you better get switched over by the 19th, lest your already barely functional code becomes completely non-functional. And now, a moment of silence for yet another ASP.NET page meeting its demise. Okay, that's enough. Are you tired of having your head attached to your body? Good news, because a new humanoid property called RequiresNeck will make it possible to disconnect a character's head from its humanoid root part without killing them, so you can make fantastic images like these. I literally just included this because I think it looks funny. As we approach spooky time in the US, Roblox is allowing developers to apply to have their game listed in a featured game sort for Halloween-themed games. Whether it's a game designed specifically around Halloween or just a temporary holiday update, you might as well apply to get some free publicity, since the sort will be visible from the 23rd until just after Halloween. The application closes on the 19th, so you've only got a couple more days to take your shot. Based on the survey, it appears Roblox is looking at a few specific attributes of your game: compatible devices, Arthro support, lack of unlicensed copyrighted material, localization, and of course, the spooky factor. By the way, don't let the progress bar at the bottom fool you, because there's definitely only one page on this survey, and if you just fill each page with gibberish to see what's on the next page, you'll accidentally submit it, like I did. Oauth for Roblox seems to have been spotted in the wild. The new events site that was launched last week requires you to sign in through this workflow, since the site is managed by Bevy Labs, not Roblox itself. Oauth is essentially a fantastic way to prove to a third party that you are who you say you are, or even provide limited access to your account with just a single click, all without revealing your password. Perhaps we'll finally be free of having to type a gibberish code into our bio for third-party services. Are you tired of Roblox not functioning exactly like other social media? Well, you may be in luck. A screenshot surfaced of a modified player list with a handle below the selected user's display name. At the moment, both simply show the player's username, but this is pretty clearly intended to allow the two to use separate names. A DisplayName property for player objects has existed since May 2017 before having its read and write securities changed from Roblox script security to none in April of this year, which seems to indicate the project was attempted a while ago, abandoned, and then recently revived. Web APIs to get, approve, and change a user's display name already exists under the users.roblox.com domain. The DisplayName's patch endpoint, which would be used to set a player's display name, returns a generic error, but the two get endpoints responsible for validating display names are functional and allow us to reverse engineer and understand the restrictions put in place. The first endpoint accepts an intended display name and a birth date. A list is provided to correlate error messages to rejection reasoning, including length, characters, and filter acceptability. A birth date is required since the filter uses a player's age to determine what is and isn't appropriate for them. Through some basic testing, the limitations of display names reveal themselves to be nearly identical to usernames, with the same 3 to 20 character limit with only a single underscore, not at the beginning or end of the name. However, there are a couple differences. The first is that multiple people can have the same display name, so John Smith can finally be himself. The second is that display names support Unicode characters, making it possible for international audiences to set their display name to their familiar character set. It also makes it possible for people to just add annoying decorations to the names and make it impossible to spell. Well, while we're poking around in the technical areas, let's take a look at the actual CoreScript responsible for the changes to the player list. The drop-down player handler module is responsible for creating the background, icon, and username label of the drop-down menu that appears when you select a player. In the render method of the component, a function called isDisplayNameEnabled is being used, and I bet you can guess what that's for. A different background image is being used for the DisplayName feature, probably to make it more readable. Two sets of components are being used, one in the event that display names are enabled, and the other for the original display. There's not much here that we wouldn't expect, except why is a player's subjection to China policies relevant to the DisplayName feature? Let's take a closer look at the module for the isDisplayNameEnabled function. We can ignore the fact that there are two functions that can be returned, since one is just a variation of the other that has the potential to yield when it called and provides its own policy values. Let's focus on the one being used by the other scripts. First off, if the useDisplayName flag is on, then show the display name no matter what. Otherwise, if the Use DisplayName China 2 or Use DisplayName China flag is on, enable the display names if the user is a Chinese player. If none of these conditions are met, the display names are kept off. I'm not sure why there are two flags that effectively do the same thing. Using Aaron's Flag Watcher, we can see that the feature is enabled in China, but not anywhere else. So why is the player list update rolled out early in China? Keep in mind that everything from this point forward is purely speculation, but it may have something to do with the regulations regarding account names imposed by the Chinese government, in particular requiring users to register with their real name in order to use various websites to eliminate anonymity. Unfortunately, I can't investigate beyond the article summary on this blog since every page regarding the regulations on the government's website is inaccessible at the time of writing. How curious. While these regulations were implemented months after Roblox first introduced the DisplayName property, it's perhaps possible that these regulations served as the catalyst, or at least a justification for moving forward with implementing the feature. And since most features are rolled out to a smaller group of users for testing anyway, perhaps it made sense to roll out in China first since they'd benefit from it the most. In conclusion, regardless of the actual story behind the implementation of display names, it's quite fascinating to consider that we may at least partially have an authoritarian regime to thank for the introduction of a cool feature. Wait, that's a terrible note to end on. Hi, I hope you found this experiment informative. I'm down to do more of these, but only if it seems like people actually get value from it, because I already learned this stuff by browsing the internet all day. Any feedback regarding what there should be more or less of would be appreciated. Bye.